Blog Talk Radio.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and unfortunately, my audio, I think, just sort of quit on me here, so I apologize for an abrupt halt to that. But anyways, welcome to Golf Talk Live. We are live, of course, every Thursday evening from 6 to 8 Central or 7 to 9 Eastern for those of you on the East Coast. It is, as it's hard to believe, it is the 19th of November. We're getting close to the end of the month, and next week, of course, is going to be Thanksgiving, so we'll be observing that holiday and not going to have a show next week for either of the shows, Golf Talk Live or my other broadcast that I co-host with Cindy Miller, LPGA professional Cindy Miller, the Women of Golf show. We won't be broadcasting that at all next week, and we'll be, of course, returning the first week of December for both shows. So we thank you, of course, for tuning in tonight live. For those of you, most of you have figured out how to find me, but for those of you that want to relay the information, here's how to get in touch with us. Go to blogtalkradio.com, go up in the search key, and you can type in Golf Talk Live, and that will bring you to the main page. And, of course, always on the live broadcasts, the main show will be at the top. But for some reason, if you can't join us tonight during the live broadcast, not a problem. You can go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live and just scroll down to the on-demand section, and you can pick up not only tonight's broadcast with the recorded version, but any of the previously aired broadcasts that you might have missed along the way. So glad that you're joining us. For those of you who are joining me live tonight from really all over the world, which is a blessing. For those of you that want to call into the show, we'd always love to hear from you when you get a chance, and don't be shy. You can do so and join the conversation by calling 646-716-4667, or you can email questions or comments to me at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. Or if you're interested in coming on the show, as I've had mentioned to the guys off air, I had a couple reach out here in the last day or two that wanted to be guests on the show. You can do so by calling me or reaching me, rather, at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com, and I will certainly reach out and get you into the schedule. Always update the shows on social media at facebook.com/Golf Talk Live blog. And make sure, of course, that you throw a like my way when you're visiting the page. And also on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Ted and Buck, CEO, and CEO, of course, is in capital letters. Got a great show for you this evening. Going to be starting off again this week with Coach's Corner. Took a break last week, but this week we're going to start off with Coach's Corner. Got two great guys. Been on the show many, many times, Pete Buchanan and Clint Wright. And then Clint's going to be sticking around for the second half. I'm going to wear him out tonight. He's going to be joined by a couple of his fellow professionals, Mike Lawrence and Todd Ellison from TGM Golf, and they're going to be talking about the R3 approach tonight on the show in the second hour. But let me bring the guys on here for the Coach's Corner. As I mentioned, Clint Wright, a 30-year member of the PGA. He's a partner at TGM Golf and a big proponent of the R3 approach, which we'll be talking more about in the second half, and really one of the best covering the short game today, in my opinion, and certainly among one of my favorite guests and panelists here on the Coach's Corner. Second, of course, is Pete Buchanan, also fast becoming a favorite guest and panelist on the show as well. And he is the founder and owner of Plain Simple Golf, LLC, which houses the Plain Simple Golf Circuit and Simple Swing Repeater Training Brace, which he's talked about on the show. And he's taught the great game, of course, for over 30 years. Pete has really simplified the golf swing with his philosophy and in an effort to really make it simple for players to play this great game that we all love. So, guys, without any further ado, Clint, Pete, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Great to be here, Ted. Thanks.
Not a problem. Appreciate it, guys, as always. And as I said, Clint, you're going to be sticking around for the whole 2 hours tonight, so bless your heart.
Yeah, be okay.
Bless
we'll
your heart.
Maybe I can stay up that late.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, if I hear any snoring in the background, I'll know it's you. But anyways, guys, what I wanted to talk about tonight, I've tried to sort of been bringing along this theme of really ways that we can grow the game, and we talked about so many different things. And I was always, of course, as I was mentioning off air, always getting involved in social media and things like that. And I came across, of course, the First Tee, who we're all familiar with, of course, and their program. And they had 10 points on there that I thought were worth discussing. And it's not just so much about growing the game, but it's really directed, of course, at the youth. And this is an area that obviously we really want to develop hard and get these youngsters involved into the game. So we're going to talk about that tonight. And I'm going to read out some things that I got off actually of their website. I'm not going to lie. I snafu'd it from the First Tee website here for tonight's discussions. And, we'll talk a little bit about the point and get you guys to, of course, expand on it. And the point number one that talks about really wellness for life, and it really talks about the health and well-being of individuals. And as we all know, guys, obesity has certainly been an epidemic here in the United States and abroad. And golf really is a sport that helps young people, particularly, for lack of better words, get off the couch. When we play golf, of course, walking the golf course and carrying your bag has proven to be able to burn a few calories, and you're walking quite a few steps. In fact, estimated average 10,000 steps in a round of golf. So lots of good things. I know we can't get into all the specifics here, but Clint, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind, and just really maybe expand a little bit about that and how important it is to keep ourselves in good shape, not just physically, but eating well and all of that, and why particularly it's important for the youth of the that want to get into golf, why it's important for them to adopt good habits early on.
Well, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, here I'm almost 60 years old, and you start thinking about, well, if I could take better care of myself, I'd have, done a lot better. But it's an obvious thing that if you look around when we were kids, the television came on at the 6 o'clock news, and there was no video games. You played outside. We rode bicycles. Just a different level of activity that we had as children because we didn't have these other things available to us.
Right.
You see the kids today. I mean, they're playing their video games and whatever. They may be studying some, but you see a lot of sedentary movement about our children. You don't, and maybe it's the technology, or maybe it's just the fear factor that their parents don't let them out of the front yard. I'm not sure, but it could be a combination of both. But the kids in today's world don't get the physical activity that we had just on a daily basis. Now, obviously, we have, soccer and football and baseball and Little League, just like we had in those days as well. But golf is something you don't need a team for. Although we're seeing the team activities in the PGA now, which is apparently becoming quite a success. But you don't need a team for it. You can go out any public golf course that I've ever been on. They don't charge to use the putting green. You can chip and putt all day long for free. You can go to a practice facility for little or no money, and there's no time limit. You can stay all day hitting a large basket of balls if you want to, and you don't need you don't need a team or a coach really to get started. We'd encourage you to have a coach or a teacher,
sure,
but you don't need that. So it's really the First Tee is a great organization. We have a very strong First Tee group here in Spartansburg and Greenville, and just getting the kids out of the house was something to do that they don't require a teammate to do. They can get out, we've all played a few 9 holes by ourselves, just go out, nobody else around, well, let's go walk 9.
Yeah.
And I think that's the lure the kids need to have, is something that they can be kind of self-motivated to a point, along with some leadership like through the First Tee or the PGA team programs, and all the junior programs across this country that the individual pros do, that you never hear about, that have the 15, 20 kids every summer. They're out there grinding at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's humid and hot, and they're out there grinding, getting these kids out of the house, getting them moving and going forward. And those are the guys I think are the kind of the heroes of our game, because you never hear about them. You don't know who they are. So, Yes, I mean, it's obvious that the more healthy you are, the better opportunities you'll have throughout your entire life, whether you're 10 years old or 80 years old. And
Right.
golf, I think, gives them that opportunity.
Right, and the other thing that the other proponent I want to bring into this, Pete, before I let you add some comments as well, is golf, as we all know, mimics life in so many ways, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well throughout the session. But Clint pretty much summed it up there. I mean, obviously we want to be healthy, and I'm going to be I'm in my early 50s now. I'll be 52 in March of next year, so I'm climbing that ladder as well. And, often I look back and think of all the things, and I'm still guilty of it sometimes, of not always eating as well as I should. But you're right, Clint. One of the things that I did as well as a youngster is I got out and I was more physically active, whether it be hiking, bicycling, playing different sports, where you're not seeing that. One of the things that golf does, even though it is primarily been brought up as an individual sport, Pete, as Clint talked about, it is engaging in sort of a team aspect with things like the Ryder Cup and other events that they're holding. But Pete, also it does something else, and that is it offers an opportunity to create lifelong friendships, if you will, very early on by kids getting out and playing together and practicing together, as Clint talked about. Let's talk about a little bit about some of the advantages of getting into golf and some of the friendships that can be developed out of it.
Well, I was fortunate, growing up, we had probably, I think, over 80 kids in our junior program, and there was a core of us, I think starting at about 12, that played together all the way through high school and some of us into college. And, it was great because, we were all there every day at the golf course. And whether we were in the pool in the 19th hole or on the range practicing or playing, we hung around together all the time. And most of us also would pitch in and work, or some of us worked, at the golf course as well. But and I still keep in touch with a lot of those guys today. And so, yeah, it does do that. It gives you an opportunity to, you're going to spend a lot of time with somebody out there walking around playing the golf course, and you get to know them a little bit better. And golf, as you know, tends to tweak your personality out of you when you're playing.
Yep.
And whether sometimes that's good or bad, but it happens. But I think it's a great opportunity to, first of all, to be outside, but second of all, to get in with some folks that all pretty much have the same thing in common. You're all trying to play, you're all trying to get better. As I said, a bunch of us, went on. I was the only one that sought out to go on to the professional ranks, but it's still fun to you'll see one of the guys on Facebook, or you'll get a call or a text for somebody and say, hey, we're going to be such and such, and are you interested? Can you make it? And so we still try to get together and play, and so yeah, that is one of the great advantages of that, of being able to make those lifelong friendships and just play. I mean, that was the thing I enjoyed the most, and I think one of the things I probably missed the most was just playing. As we get older and life comes about, whether that's in the golf business or other business or kids, or that part seems to dissipate a little bit, and that's the thing that I always enjoyed, was just getting out and just going out and playing. Grab the bag, walk 9 holes and have some fun.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. One of the other things, Clint, that also golf has started to really gravitate to, and I think for a couple of reasons, I think that as more women get involved in golf, they're, of course, wanting to find activities to include the whole family aspect. I mean, husbands want to, certainly not all of them, but more and more of them want to be able to have their wives play with them. And conversely, of course, when the women get involved, they want to have it's a family experience. So family golf, if you will, is how I'll phrase it, is something that's starting to grow more and more now, particularly now that women have gotten involved. Obviously, there's some big advantages of that. Doing that, the resorts are opening up to that sort of methodology, if you will, and there's so many great opportunities. Obviously, you want to encourage people that you're working with to expand in their families for obvious reasons, but what are some other advantages, really, that golf can do in the family unit?
Well, a lot of it is kind of like the same aspect of let's all have dinner, together. You get an opportunity, and like Pete was saying, you get out on the golf course and you kind of find out who you are, personalities and whatever. But I can tell you, from an historical standpoint, I have a sister and my mother and my dad. The family golf in our family was my dad and I going out and playing golf. Because my sister didn't play, and neither did my mother. In today's world, my wife plays. My youngest daughter plays. She's actually a high school golf coach now here locally. And they had their end of the season family golf tournament last Sunday.
Wow.
So we went over and played, had a blast. You never saw that happen when I was in high school.
No.
And it's the girls' team. They got so many girls, and it's kind of a cool thing. I mean, they didn't have girls golf when I was in high school. They didn't have girls golf when I was in college. So that's the atmosphere that you begin to find is that it's not just for the guys and the boys and the dads. There's a lot of full family golf going on right now, and that's a wonderful thing. Being a father of two grown daughters, I mean, I think it's kind of the natural progression of things as we get older. Our kids come back, we want to go play a little golf or something, So they enjoy doing that. But as far as the family is concerned, I mean, you look at we need to get back to that somewhat, because if you start looking at the problems in our industry,
right,
it's that middle range club to where they need the entire family participating at the golf course, whether it be at the pool, the restaurant, social nights or whatever. That's a lost aspect that our industry has to try to recover in the new generation. I think we've missed that in the 45 to 55-year-olds. But in the 25 to 35, that's an atmosphere that we have to recreate, or we're going to continue to lose mid-range golf clubs like you wouldn't believe. So not only is it important for the family for that to be part of the golf activity, it's important for our industry to get that back.
Yeah, and that well said. And that's so true. One of the reasons why I think the family unit is important is families have sort of, and certainly not in every case. So I don't want to draw a sweeping brush across. Pardon me. But one of the things that's happened because of social media and because of video games and all that other things that have come in with technology, it's actually really sort of dispersed the family unit, if you will, somewhat. And I think golf is really a great equalizer because you don't have to be a professional. You can play really at any level. There's many opportunities to incorporate into a vacation. And you don't have to play necessarily 18 holes. You can play 9 holes. You can go to facilities that offer just chipping and putting and just make a day of it or a few hours of it and incorporate it into your vacation time. So it's a great bonding time, and it's a great opportunity, which is going to lead into the next point here very nicely. It's a great opportunity for parents particularly to refresh their own memories, but also teach some good etiquette to their kids. And Pete, this is something that really golf has really been masterful at is, developing good etiquette in order to play successfully. And that doesn't mean necessarily the ability to play, but just learning to govern yourself. Because as you know, in golf, there is no judge or referee per se. Instead, players have to learn to govern themselves and their fellow competitors. So this is really a great opportunity for parents, particularly as they bring their youngsters in and learn to be able to learn that etiquette themselves, but also to pass that on to their kids, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know that from personal experience in the junior program we grew up in, that was the first thing we did. The last thing we wanted was to have the juniors out on the golf course and have the members complaining that they're out there. We wanted them to be ambassadors for golf, and we wanted them to behave, at their utmost. And, a lot of times the juniors will get blamed for things that happened, and we know it wasn't them. But that's a whole other issue. But, it is about learning, about discipline, about respect, about, just good old,
patience
out on the golf course, which patience, absolutely. I've always said you got to be patient with golf, otherwise you'll become one. You have to make sure that, you just you're patient with what's going on, you're polite, you're respectful to everybody else who's out there, and I think golf helps teach a lot of that. And there's a gal here in our area that runs a great program, and you can see that's a big part of what she does, and it's great to see that. I'm just an independent guy, out at the range, but I can see what she's doing, and it just makes for a better kid. That's what I see, and there's a lot of kids that do play golf, and you can just see the behaviors a little bit different. But going back to what you were talking about before with technology and all that stuff, when we traveled in the car, I got a big Chief notebook and a pencil. I mean, that's all I got. And and nowadays you can see what everybody else has, but I think that has a lot to do with it. But on the other side of the coin, though, too, in some respects, a lot of that technology and a lot of those games have made kids sharper.
Sure.
I know my son, for example, with all the things he does and all the different games and things he played, reaction time, the things that he learned. I mean, they were actually a bonus. And if we can figure out how to draw that same type of technology and the same things those kids are using back into golf, making the apps a little bit more fun instead of just reading what the ball does, having more games to play, more challenging things to do, I think that will help, spur a little bit more interest in the game.
Right, and Clint, just to add a little bit more on etiquette, if you don't mind, there's a lot of things that not just the kids but parents can learn as well. Golf, as we know, has a lot of rules, but at the same time, it teaches you some of the things that we just talked about, patience and things like that. But it also gives an opportunity for parents to show kids a way of preparing themselves, and this is where I'm going to get into the next aspect of it, is preparing for their careers, for business. Golf is as we have come to learn, is a great tool for business. A lot of business professionals use it. A lot of women who are getting into golf are seeing the benefits in that. But it's a great tool, if you will, learning through etiquette and other things that can help these youngsters as they develop through their careers, not only in academically, but later on when they get out and actually get into their careers. So let's talk about that, some of the things that golf does to prepare one for their later life in business.
Well, I think it's real simple. As somebody that I've worked with the rules of the golf and got a lot of seminars over the years and stuff, and golf to me is real simple. If you understand the core issues of playing the game according to the rules, it's a real simple issue that you can use for golf. It's also a real simple issue in your daily life. It's real simple. Is that words and actions mean something. Mm-hmm. That every word in that rule means something.
Right.
You have to read every word. It's an A ball or a the ball. So it's a real different. And every action you take means something. Mm-hmm. If you make this action and it's not according to the rules, there's consequences for that. So I think that that's the same way in life. I mean, we've gotten into a society. We can get. You talking about rabbit holes? Right. We can run down a lot of them right here. We've got into. We've got a society now where you can just say and do anything you want to and just walk away. There's no consequences to it. I mean, nobody holds anybody, to some kind of a credible standard of, hey, you shouldn't do that. That's not, right. But golf holds us to those standards. If we play by the rules and you understand those, the game of golf, you hold yourself to those standards. Nobody else is holding you to them. That's a real key element. In golf, nobody's out there throwing a yellow flag saying that you held the guy as he was running around the corner.
Right.
Okay?
Right, exactly.
If you know, and a lot of it is, and the more severe the penalty is in golf, is when you know you were doing it and then tried to cover it up.
Right, exactly.
You make a mistake on hole number 1 and don't correct it until hole number 3. Guess what? You're done. That's disqualification. We don't give you a little slap on the wrist. You can just pack up your stuff and start over again tomorrow maybe. So I really believe that what it teaches kids, and I learned this because I grew up on a military golf course. Mm-hmm. People in the military are different. You know where I grew up, Dad. And
right.
People, you didn't get away with anything.
No.
Okay? I mean, the worst thing that could happen at my golf club is for you to find something on the golf course and not turn it in. Integrity, honesty. It's not mine. I'm going to turn it in. Heck, in today's world, they don't turn in you lose something on the golf course, it's gone.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a shame. But I really believe if you understand those core ingredients about the rules of golf, you can carry those on through life. What you say and how you act matters.
Yeah, and Pete, just to expand a little bit, one other thing that I want, because I think you had mentioned this earlier on, what it does too from a business standpoint, taking up golf and learning to play, and again, it doesn't matter what level you're at, whether you're a beginner or not, but incorporating that into your business life, what it does, particularly for somebody if you're in sales and you're wanting to use it as a way of networking and so forth, it does two things. Again, besides the obvious learning the etiquette and integrity of golf, but it also gives you and provides you an opportunity with some of your customers to get a sense of how they handle themselves in different situations, as well as it conversely gives them an opportunity to see how you handle yourself. So it's a great tool that way. Touch on that a little bit, some of the benefits that on both sides that they can see.
Well, just from a straight up business standpoint, being out on the golf course in a quote unquote sales meeting, I mean, you're going to be out there for a few hours, so there's plenty of time to get a lot of things done, but there's also a great chance to read somebody, and that's one of the things that early on when I would talk to some of our members and some of the guys that were big in business, they said they would love to do that because they could get a good picture of how somebody was by playing 18 holes with them. And so I learned that from an early standpoint of, being able to be out on the golf course and see how somebody acts, see what they do, see how they converse. It gives you a pretty good read on how they are. And from a business standpoint, that's a benefit to have. And, being out there and working with somebody and seeing what they are, what they can do. If you're trying to get something passed on to them and, you can see what kind of a person they are, it gives you a pretty good picture of where you can move forward. I had a couple of guys that I grew up, they were older members of the club, but, they passed on some things that the way they worded it was a little bit different, but, they always told me that, you got to work hard, keep your mouth shut, and never forget where you came from. I mean, those are some philosophies that can go, basically anywhere. But, most of the business guys that were there, I always would bend their ears about, their own businesses, what they do. And that was a lot learned from me from a personal standpoint. And some of these young kids can do that by, you got a guy that's successful in business, go play 18 holes with him. You'll get a good read on how to be successful in business just by watching and listening.
Exactly. One of the things that, and well said, Pete, one of the things that I always learned, early on when I would play with prospective clients is their decision-making process. Because a lot of times out in the golf course, like you said, you could be with them for several hours. And when they're faced with difficult situations, it wasn't so much about, were they able to execute the shot, but it was their thought process that went in. Were they very indecisive? Were they, confused and not able to make a decision? Even sometimes if it was the wrong decision, I was able to ascertain and watch their thought process. What they were sort of saying to themselves. I could tell by how they handled themselves if they were nervous, they were uncomfortable in situations. And it wasn't because, necessarily that I was a better golfer or anything that made them nervous. I'm sure that in some ways it did. But a lot of it was just, it told me that how they handled themselves on the golf course very closely mimicked how they handled themselves in business if they were indecisive. So I always knew as a salesperson at that time whether or not this was going to be somebody that was going to be easily motivated to either be interested in my product or service beyond, just a short presentation. So I always knew how to handle them. If they were very indecisive, then I had to handle them a different way. If I knew that they were somebody that I could very easily close a sale with, then I might get into things while we're playing. But if they weren't, that was definitely something I didn't want to do, on that particular time is to get too aggressive or too assertive in that particular time, because I knew that they would be the type of person that would have to, leave and think about things. So if you try to push somebody too much in that sort of mindset, it's just not going to happen. And it actually taught me a lot from my own standpoint in preparation for businesses as I moved on. One of the other things as well, Clint, I want to go back to you here, is emotions. We all get faced, and golf can be a range of emotions, and this is a great opportunity to manage those emotions while we're out there. As I talked about in the very beginning, golf closely parallels real life as one experiences the highs and lows of the game, and it can range from the excitement of getting a birdie to the anxiety of a triple bogey. And for young people particularly, that person's ability to keep each shot in perspective and manage their own emotions and still be able to maintain a positive outlook is really gives them a sense of being, if you will. Talk about how important emotions are on the golf course, how it can hurt and how it can help.
Well, I'm probably the wrong person to be asking that. Yeah, I'm most likely the worst person you could have asked about that.
All right. Do you want me to pass this one off to Pete?
No. I think it. That over the years, I mean, it depends on how important things are to you, but it's an evolving thing. We all have ups and downs emotionally, and that we talk about it some in TGM Golf in the R3 about staying kind of emotionally neutral. Mm-hmm. Is that you can't get overly excited and you can't get overly angry. I have trouble with the kind of the frustration level on the course of expecting more out of myself than I really should at this point. But and that gets in the way with me quite often. But it's something that we have to kind of maintain a level of emotions. And it's obvious that when we make a birdie or have a good round of golf, the emotional level is positive and go. But I think what we dwell in the most is, everybody can play good when they're playing good. Right. The question is how do you manage when things are not going as well as you'd like them to? And that's the same way in life. I mean, when everything's going rosy for you, I mean, it's pretty easy. Mm-hmm. So golf gives you an opportunity to try to learn how to deal with the difficulties and when it's not going the way you want to go, and come up with some abilities to make some judgments. We related when you're out in the woods, try to find the best path back to get there with the least amount of trouble. Mm-hmm. So if life's not treating you right, you have to try to figure out how to get back, find that easy path to get back to the positive attitudes about what you're doing. And golf's the same way. I mean, we all can stay high, and we're playing good. We're rattle off some pars on birdie here and there. That's easy. When it's not going well, we have to find our own personal way to eliminate that negative emotion and get back to at least neutral. I don't think you're going to go from negative to positive, but if we can go from negative back to a neutral position, then we have an opportunity to move it back over to the positive side. And I think you see the best players out there that do that. They fully, and life's the same way. I mean, you have to expect some highs and lows. You're going to have good days and bad days. And right. If golf teaches us that we have good days, bad days, good shots, bad shots, then we can, have a level of emotional control that says, okay, well, this is not going to last forever. Let's take an honest look at it and see if we can't get back over here to neutral, to where we can move on forward. And like I said, I mean, it's something that we all continue to involve, trying to make ourselves better at doing that. I don't think you ever get to the point that, okay, I got this emotional thing figured out.
Right.
It
evolves.
It totally evolves from the time you're 10 years old until, you stop playing golf when you're 120. I don't know. Yeah. Because we all have to make adjustments as we change. I mean, as we get older, we all know our game's going to be different. I mean, I play a different style of golf today than I did before. I got a driver and 7 hybrids, a pitching wedge, and a putter. Who would have ever thought that?
Right.
So you learn as you go, and you start beginning to accept the fact that when you tee off on par 4s, you're going to be the first person to hit in the fairway because everybody else is 30 yards past you.
Right.
You know, you have, and that's an emotional acceptance. If you don't accept that, you're not ever going to get past that frustration. And that's part of the thing I'm beginning personally to learn about that emotional issues, and to say, okay, well, I'm going to hit it as hard as I can. I'm going to get a chance to play first again, so it's okay. But that's a learning process. So I guess the whole point about emotions is that it's going to be always evolving into something new. Your life's always going to evolve into something new, and you hopefully at an early age learn how to manage the ups and downs, at least at that particular time, where you can learn to adjust as you go. And hopefully those things, I know that you know, when I was coming up as a junior, I mean, you were talking about playing. You know, Pete played with a bunch of kids. We had the same thing, and I mean, you know, it was exciting to win a 10-cent Nassau, and it was devastating to lose.
Yep.
Yes, it was.
You know, exactly. And so you just learn how to get through it and go on, but it's not easy. I think, to me, the emotional side and the control of emotions of the game, as we all well know, is what makes a difference between champions and amateurs.
That's so true. And Clint, I'm glad I passed it on to you. You did a great job in explaining it. And
I'm right.
Pete,
I live it every day. I mean,
yeah, I know. And Pete, I'm gonna let you take this from a slightly different perspective for a couple of reasons. But you know, Clint, let me just say this is you know, with the exceptions of obviously on the professional level being number one, but being first, this is the one area in life that that you don't necessarily want to be first. You want to be able to hit it the farthest out there, and you want your partners to be first to hit. So it's kind of, you know, all our lives we strive to be, you know, first at something, and then later in life, of course, when age catches up with you ultimately achieve that at the time you really don't want to. But all kidding aside, right. but and listen, I'm getting there too. Pete, let me ask you this, and Clint touched on this a little bit, you know, when we're talking about the professional levels, and he raised some interesting points. The professionals have obviously, and certainly not in every case, but overall, you know, when they get out there and maybe they've played a bad hole or so, they've learned to be able to adapt and recover very quickly, which a lot of amateurs, and one of the I guess the negative sides from an amateur's perspective is that they might carry a bad hole for the next 6 or 7 or maybe even for the whole round. The pros obviously don't have that luxury. Not saying it doesn't happen occasionally, but very rarely on the professional level. What is it that they're doing differently in managing their emotions, do you think, than what the amateurs are doing?
Well, I think, first of all, from just an overall golf playing standpoint, they've played enough great golf to know that there's enough holes left to recover. And you know, they can make those low numbers to recover from that. You know, one of the things, I'm glad you brought this topic up because it's really fresh. And one of the guys who just won, you know, not too long ago was Peter Malnati on the PGA Tour. Mm-hmm. There isn't a kid with a better attitude that I've ever met in my life than Peter Malnati. His positive attitude is infectious. And, you know, it doesn't seem to faze him. He'll bogey 4 holes in a row, and then the next thing you turn around, he's made 5 birdies. Yeah. And it's I think it's those guys that have played enough to know that there's always going to be time to make up for it. And I think we can pass that along to the amateur players that, you know, it's only one shot, you know, and you can make up for those. And I try to get them to tell them, too. I said, you know, you want to try to avoid the disaster ones. And, you know, I always say a positive attitude can carry you further than ability anytime. And so as long as you can keep the outlook, you know, straight up, I think it gives you, you know, the advantage to know that there's time to make up for anything that you've done. But I just think from a professional, a tour player, you know, I just think it comes from experience. They've played enough rounds to know that there's going to be ample time to recover from that, and it really isn't that, you know, damaging of a thing to them. You know, plus you know, they're going to play next week anyway. So, you know, it's I think it just gives them a little bit different outlook as to what's going on, and I don't think they put as much strength, you know, to each one of those shots when they have a bad hole, because you know, they just plug along, you know, and they just keep playing, and I think that's what I try to teach all the younger ones that I have. I said, you know, you got to keep playing. There's plenty of holes left, and you got to keep the attitude forward. I always say, well, I want you to move your attitude forward. Don't let it go backwards. And as long as you're moving it forward, you're going to be able to recover from anything that's happened to you. And I like the fact that Clint was talking about being out in the woods. I always say when you get into trouble, the time to make up for being in trouble is not while you're in it.
Yeah.
You just got to get out of it. You're usually going to make it even worse. I heard a phrase one time: a double bogey is a bad shot followed by a dumb one. And you're already in a tough situation. Get yourself out of it first, and then go back. You remember those old Leave It to Beaver shows? If Beaver just would have fessed up in the first place, it would have been a lot better. Of course, the show wouldn't have been very
yeah.
good. But if he just fessed up in the first place, he wouldn't have gotten into the deep trouble he got into. But I think that's the way you look at it going down the road. We're all going to have those downsides, and so it's taking the time to look, get yourself on the straight and narrow as quickly as you can, and don't dawdle in the negative or the trouble.
Do you think? Let me ask you just to add to this. You just as we were talking here, it made me think of another, addition to managing emotions. We practice different areas of the game. We practice the short game, we practice the long game, we practice out of the bunkers and so forth. But is there a way, Clint, and I'm going to throw this back to you, is there a way that we can practice our emotions? Is there a way that we can somehow in our practice sessions create scenarios that will cause us to maybe by moving into the ball into difficult situations, cause us to sort of tap in and find a balance, if you will, I guess is the word I'm looking for, is to be able to find a balance in our practice that will help us so that when we get out on the golf course and get faced with some of these difficult situations, we'll be able to handle them emotionally much better. Is there ways that we can do that? And if so, let's give us some examples.
Well, I think that, let me take just a little bit different angle on it.
Sure.
I don't think you can practice your emotions. Okay, I just don't see how you can do that because it's at the moment,
right?
When you're out there. But I do, and Mike and I get in these conversations all the time about confidence versus trust versus faith.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's three different things, and if I'm out there practicing those shots out of the divot, or I got to hit a low draw around the tree, or I got a root in front of my ball here, I'm going to imagine I've got to try to figure out how to get this ball over that root. Not that I'm going to go out and practice around roots, maybe put a towel out in front of my ball or something along those lines to give me some perspective on how to play those difficult shots. Okay? Now, if I'm doing that, then when I get myself in those positions where I've got those intermediate shots where I got to hit a low cut or a low draw or up over or play it out of some bare rough or whatever, then my confidence and trust level rise in whether I'm going to be successful here on this shot. So with that in mind, I think my emotions stay lower as far as anxiety, as far as being able to hit those shots, simply because I have practiced how to hit the shot, not necessarily practiced keeping the anxiety out of my game. But what I look at is I'm confident I can hit this shot because I have hit it before. I'm trusting the fact with faith that I can hit it right now. I have to have faith in my ability to hit the shot at the moment. The only way I'm going to have that faith in myself is have done it before and been successful with it before. So therefore, using your scenario, if I'm going to go to the practice tee today and I'm going to practice my get-out-of-jail shots.
Right.
Okay? And that's all I'm going to practice, only to build my confidence and my trust that I can hit it when I need to, which gives me faith and lowers my anxiety and most likely increases my level of success because, I'm not trying to create everything right at the moment. I can't develop faith off of creation at the moment. I have to have already created it, practiced it, rehearsed it, and now I can have faith in myself that I can pull it off right now. That's the same thing we get into a lot with the short game with bunker play. A lot of golf courses have bunkers on them, right?
Right.
Most all of them do have some kind of hazard, sand bunkers, whatever. But you're beginning to see more and more, but for years you never saw practice bunker.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
He never saw practice bunker around the green. So how in the world could a person go into a bunker with a sand wedge in their hand and have any faith that they could be successful? They never practiced it.
Yeah.
They don't have a clue how to hit it. So the same thing with those get-out-of-jail shots. I think that if you want to bring down your anxiety level, it's not about the emotional training. It's about the physical training to hit those shots that help you keep that emotional level down.
Right. Well said. Well said. Pete, one of the things that I know that you've done through your process is to try and simplify the golf swing and give people a little easier perspective on and be able to enjoy the game. One of the things that's happened, in the industry is with all of these different theories and mechanics and that it's become very confusing. You've taken a much different approach than many others. You've really simplified the process to a point that allows the students that you're working with to not have to focus on so much of the mechanics and so forth. So using that analogy, if you will, that also creates an opportunity to be able to manage yourself out in the golf course, knowing that you're confident that the swing that you're taking to that golf course is something that you can repeat time and time again, correct?
Absolutely. One of the things that I always try to get the players to understand is that if you haven't practiced it, you don't want to be using it on the golf course. A lot of times you'll hear somebody say, hey, I saw this on TV. Well, there's a double bogey coming real fast, because they're trying to play shots that they haven't done before. And so, you always want to be able to, under pressure, you're going to go, if you want to call it a bank of swings, when you get under pressure, if you don't have enough of those shots that you practice in there, you're probably not going to be able to pull that off. And so it's important to be able to, first of all, understand what your limits are, what you can and can't do. If it's a shot that you're looking at that, I've never done this before, you probably don't want to do it. You should probably play yourself into a safe place so you can play something that you have. But you always want to make sure, going back to the practice, not only practicing different shots, but also, a little wager never hurts. If you're playing for a nickel or playing for, a drink after you're done or something, you get a little wager in those practice shots. That gets that anxiety up a little bit and teaches you how to, to play under those conditions. And so
right.
I have stuff set up all the time. I have little competitions all the time in the short game. Don't just go out and hit putts. Let's have a contest. I want you to go up against each other, and let's put a little pressure on here. Let's play for something. It's gonna tweak that anxiety a little bit and tweak that pressure and show you how you can handle it. You can see right away the ones that can and can't handle it, and that provides a whole other teaching aspect to help them.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. And I think I've mentioned this a long time ago with some of the friends back home that I used to play with all the time on a regular basis. I obviously don't play with them as much anymore, but I had a particular group a foursome that I used to play with. And one of the gentlemen in particular, I won't give out his name. I'll be kind, but always played a pretty decent game. He was not, I certainly won't say he was the best ball striker, but he could hold his own. But as soon as a few dollars were on it, it was amazing how much things changed. His putting was a little sketchy, and his ball striking suddenly started going down. And, we might just, again, we didn't always necessarily play the overall round, but we might on a par 3, closest to the pin or what have you. Sometimes on a par 4, we might have other things that we might add into it. But anyways, it was just interesting, that analogy that you just talked about, how putting that additional pressure on can help, get through some of the issues that you might be faced with out on the golf course. And some people were able to manage that additional pressure very well, and others don't. And it's a good test, really, on yourself. If you want to test yourself, for you guys out there, what you can do is you can, for every bogey, you can put a couple of dollars in a pot, and at the end of the day, you can, for every dollar that you've thrown in that pot, you're going to give it to your wife when you get home. So obviously, that's an incentive to want to get some birdies, and for every one that you don't bogey or double bogey, you can consider yourself even. But there's different things that you can do as you both have said, to practice. Just a couple of other things. We're just winding down here for just a few minutes, and the reason why I want to just sort of have a general conversation tonight, and we're certainly not going to solve any great problems here, but I just found it interesting because we're trying to really target the youth, I think, in golf now and get them out to play. I mean, we obviously all work with the 25 and 30 up crowd that have gravitated to the game or that have been in the game for many years, the 50 and up crowd as well. But the youth is sort of has been a tough nut to crack because there's so many other distractions. But some things that parents, and this goes back to the family golf, one great thing about golf is golf has become really a very safe place for them to play. So if you're, parents that want to get your kids involved in something that puts them in a safe environment, a golf course is a great way to do that. It also teaches them to be able to practice personal responsibility. As we have discussed here tonight, the ball's not always going to go or bounce the way you want, and regardless of the outcome, as you put it, Clint, there's really no teammates to blame. You have to be accountable for what happens. We also, touched on, some lifelong friendships that can develop out of it. And obviously it's a great opportunity to enjoy the outdoors. I don't know of any other sport really that gives you the benefit for as long as it does. But I'm going to give each of you a couple of minutes if you'd like, and Clint, I'll start with you. If anything else that you can think of that you would like to relay to the audience tonight that maybe we can do as professionals to really encourage some of the youth to get involved.
Well, I mean, it's really hard to add to what we've already talked about, to be honest with you. I mean, the encouragement to get them involved is out there. I mean, if you look at for the longest time, we kind of gave the junior golf kind of the, okay, we're going to have a summer clinic and we'll get through this week and then we'll go on, Right. And we lost a generation to the soccer moms. Those kids now have kids. And we relate trying to attract those juniors, I think, and we have this conversation around our course all the time. It's not about the 9-year-old to 12-year-olds. It's really about the 25 to 35-year-old.
Right.
That we need to reattract, because those were the kids, that was the generation of kids that our industry lost.
Yeah.
To the other games and stuff. And so we see some clubs now really getting involved in non-golf activities at their clubs. There's a club here locally, they had a ping pong championship the other day at a country club, at a golf course. But it was an activity, it wasn't golf, so everybody could participate. I think that the encouragement level we have to do as an industry is for it to become, and you can see, I don't know if you're familiar with Topgolf.
Yes, I am.
Topgolf is an entertainment center with a driving range. We need to begin to encourage through entertainment centers that have golf courses attached. What do we do here that's going to be good for the entire family? Mom may not play golf or dad may not play golf. So what are you going to offer them to get their kids engaged in our game? It's almost we almost have to trick them into getting their kids back at the golf course. What kind of bait can we use other than golf to get them on a golf course so hopefully they'll take it up? We teach a lot of the Clemson University golf classes at one of our courses. And it is phenomenal to see these kids come out. First time a lot of them have ever been exposed to golf, going, man, this is fun. And we teach them how to be golfers. I don't, but the gentleman that runs the program, he teaches them how to be golfers. How to go to the golf course, how to go to the pro shop, how to find the first tee box. Make them feel comfortable going out to be a first-time golfer. That's critical. Because if they don't feel comfortable, they're not going.
Right.
And they gravitate to something else. So that's really the encouragement level is there. We all know we have to encourage more play. The question is how do we do it? And I guess my attitude about it is let's make it an entertainment center. Let them have something else to do. And see if we can interest them in golf once we got them there.
Pete. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. A bait and switch.
Yeah, You raise a very interesting point, and I'm going to try for the new year. I'm going to reach out to actually the people at Top Golf and get them to come on the program, because I really like what it is that they're doing, and I'd love to get them on here and talk about it. Now, I haven't visited one of their facilities, but I understand that I know they've got one in Tampa and San Antonio.
They have two within 10 miles of each other in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah, that was my next one is Atlanta. They in the Atlanta area they have them, and then also I understand that they're either working on, I don't know if they've actually started yet, but in around Orlando is another one they're developing. So they're certainly branching out. But Pete, Clint raises some very interesting points here. Do you think that the golf industry traditionally maybe has been afraid to sort of step out of the box a little bit? I mean, some of the traditional clubs, want to keep golf the way it is and don't want to think outside of the box. But really, as Clint just talked about, there's a generation in that 25 range that has sort of moved away from golf. Maybe they had access through their parents that maybe belonged to clubs or what have you, but they've sort of stepped out because they found other interests. Is what Clint's talking about, is that a way that you see as well that we need to expand on to get them interested, obviously, in golf, but not necessarily shoveling them out to a local golf course all the time is necessarily going to be the best way to open that door?
Well, I think not only do we have to step out of the box, we got to get rid of the box. Too many golf courses are afraid to step forward. I mean, I was looking at a conversation that a friend of mine was having with a gentleman who picked up a driving range and put in a Mexican restaurant and a bar right there that could overwatch the people hitting golf balls, and then brought in professionals to give free lessons. I mean, you got food, you got beverages, you got the driving range, you got free lessons. I mean, you want to talk about encouragement to bring some people into the game, and I agree with Clint. I said the entertainment value is what we're going to have to do. I mean, that's what they're after. I mean, they entertain themselves with their phones. I mean, if we're not going to go after the entertainment value, what are we doing? We have to be able to do that, and that's why I'd love to see an app that challenges them on the golf course, and gives them games to play, gives them games to play when they're practicing. I mean, let's infuse the technology into it. Maybe we can have kids that can have an app of golf they play that just says, hey, if you like this, you'll come on to your local golf course and have a coordination between the two to encourage them to come out. But I really believe that the entertainment value is a piece that's going to be something that's going to bring them on. I know when I was developing programs and looking at golf driving range development, we always had a food and beverage piece. You got to have something other than just hitting balls, because they're not going to come. You got to give them something else. There's got to be another piece of entertainment to bring them in there, to encourage them to be there. And once you get them there, if they're sitting in the restaurant, they're sitting in the bar, and they're watching people hitting, they're going to say, hey, that looks kind of fun. Or if there's games playing and they're hooting and hollering like at Top Golf and they're having these contests, absolutely. It encourages so many more people to get involved. And I think those sort of out-of-the-box type things that some of these groups are doing. I know in Kansas City they opened a Top Golf, and it's a minimum 2-hour wait. I mean, you just can't walk in there and go play. It doesn't happen. I mean, the place is so crowded.
So the ones in Atlanta are the same way.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, here's the thing, and I'll just say this in closing, and then we've got to wrap it up. In today's society, there are so many things, and you both have hit it right on the head, is entertainment. And traditional golf, you and I and Clint, Pete, and the others tuning in, of course, we love golf. We've been around golf for a long time, many of us. But the truth of the matter is, to some of the younger generation coming up, there is so much other stimuli out there that is vying for their attention. And to some of them, they look at golf as boring in its current form. Now, that doesn't mean as they get older, they may not gravitate to it. So we need to find ways to encourage them, whether it's just sitting watching others, and invite them in an atmosphere like Top Golf or some of the other avenues out there, to at least expose them and give them the option, whether they just want to use it as an entertainment value or whether or not they want to pursue other avenues, and not treat it like we're working on the next collegiate player or high school player or even tour professional. And I'm not trying to suggest that everybody in the industry is doing that, but I think that people are under the assumption that if we can just get them out to the golf course things are going to happen naturally. And that might have been true 20, 30, 40 years ago, but in today's environment with so much, competing for their attention, we have to be more creative. And you're right, Pete, with what you said, maybe creating apps as opposed to just being instructional apps on how to, improve your game, have some other game component into it to get them more interacted. And then over time, they may want to gravitate to just playing golf in its traditional form, but give them the option of both. And I think that's maybe a direction in this environment, I think anyways, that golf needs to go.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, I want to thank both of you for some interesting discussion, and we're going to keep moving the discussion along here, and I see that my other two guests are here. So, Pete, I'm going to have to say goodbye to you for tonight, and Clint, I know you're going to hang on here as I bring out the other two and that. But, Pete, as always, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your thoughts and input on the panel discussion, and as I mentioned to you earlier, I'll get the schedule out for next year. And not only would I love to have you back on some of the panel discussions again at your convenience, but also as a separate guest as well. We can talk about that in the future. But thank you, Pete, for your input tonight.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Just one thing for everybody to keep a look at. During the PGA Show Week in January, we're going to be putting on some seminars and clinics out at Falcons Fire Golf Club in Orlando. So if you really want to get a good idea of what Plain Simple Golf and our PSG circuit is all about, go out to the website for Plain Simple Golf, and you'll start to see some of the advertisements for those coming up as we finalize everything. But there'll be a chance for the masses to get a good view of what we're doing.
Perfect. As always, Pete, again, thank you very much, and make sure that you guys do that if you're going to be going, especially if you're going down to the PGA show, to have a look at Pete's website. And I'll give that link out a little bit later on, Pete. But thank you again, as always, and I look forward to having you back on the show again.
You bet. Thanks, Ted. Thanks, Clint. I enjoyed it.
You're welcome, Pete.
Have a great evening, guys.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. Okay, as we wrap up Clint, Coach's Corner, let me bring on, I see that Mike and Todd are with us, so let me just do a quick intro for both of them, and then we'll get them on here and begin the discussion. First, our next guest coming on that's going to be joining Clint and I is Mike Lawrence. He's a life member of the PGA of America, began playing golf with his father and school buddies at the ripe old age of 10. The next year, he had a hole-in-one, got his picture in the small local newspaper sports section, was officially hooked on the game of golf, as many of us at that age got hooked on golf. His experience with the game has taken him through junior and high school golf, amateur and collegiate golf, as well as professional and tour level golf, and won many tournaments on all three levels. And he's also the co-developer of TGM Golf. And it is Mike's philosophy and belief that the game is all about golfers helping golfers, and through sharing of their personal experience with the game. Spending time with Mike, of course, on the practice tee, golf course, or just in general, one quickly experiences the enjoyable, contagious, and intriguing aspects of what being on the path to improvement in golf is all about. We're going to bring Mike on just a sec, but also Todd Ellison, all PGA teach professionals, of course, going to be joining us here as well. And Todd came actually through golf via college baseball. He made his goal to be the game of golf more enjoyable to those who would like to play better, and particularly in the junior level. And we're going to talk to him about that as we bring him on board. He's been teaching full-time for over 12 years now, and in that time he has worked with a lot of different types of players, some professional players that have won not only on the nationwide tour, which is now the web.com, as well as players who just want to enjoy the game a little bit better. So let me bring these two guys out, and we'll continue the conversation. Good evening, Mike, and good evening, Todd. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Well, I appreciate it. Let's get right into we ran a minute or two. I'm going to blame Clint on this. I'm going to throw you under the bus, okay. Clint. We ran a little bit longer on the other segment, so I apologize. Mike, why don't you just maybe give a quick introduction, how you came up with the R3 approach, how you guys sort of developed that, and then we'll get into some specific, some of the components of the R3 approach.
You know, Ted, I think it was just in evolution, really. Todd and I began teaching full-time. I was the head professional and general manager at Pickens Country Club, and Todd was there with me in the canoe rowing away, you know, and we knew that we'd like to head toward getting in a position where we could just spend all of our time teaching and coaching and just devote all of our energy and thought and action toward that end. And that came to be, and I think it was at that point in time that we really sort of began the process of what has now become the R3 approach, which is just our approach toward genuinely improving at the game.
And we're going to get into some of the specifics here. Now, you have 6 components of the R3 approach. We're going to go through each of them. We're going to try and I'm going to try and be mindful of the time because I know that there's a lot involved here. And I also want to give people the opportunity to be able to go to your website after the show and learn more about it. So we're not going to be able to get everything in here tonight, but we'll try and get a little bit of the flavor as we go along from each of the components. So let's start off. Mike, I'll let you start, and then Clint and Todd, I want to talk to you a little bit from a different perspective because I know that you work, as Clint has advised me, you work quite well with juniors, and I want to ask you at some point how you're applying some of these methods, if you will, and some of the ideology behind R3 approach with your juniors, Nat. So, Mike, let me start off with you. The first component is what?
Well, really, the R3 approach is, I began writing down my thoughts. This is how it all really evolved in terms of the book is, when you begin to write things down, you tend to understand things a little bit better. It's pretty interesting when you go about this process, and it only started out to be a short kind of a summary as to how we can more effectively direct our thoughts and actions towards genuinely improving. And, we'd have these conversations, Clint and I would have these conversations, and we'd go way down in various rabbit holes, and we'd come out and I'd put it on paper. And this is how it all evolved, Ted. I mean, this is the way it was. So I actually developed some carpal tunnel, typing,
right.
As much as I did there for periods of time. And anyway, so the R3 approach is really something that we all as golfers currently do. Mm-hmm. Everything in the R3 approach we are already doing. We don't necessarily realize it. So it's just an organization of thoughts in terms of how it is that we all approach trying to improve at this game. And the R3 approach begins with an overall strategy, which when we really think about what's a good way to genuinely approach playing the game, an overall strategy would be, and this is what we state in the R3 approach, is to simply enjoy the continuing process of doing good work, developing our golf games to the point where they can be seen and felt to be mechanically sound, physically athletic, and tactically fluid processes for playing a game. So it's a mission statement of sorts. When you stop and have a look at that statement, it's just saying that, doing good work is that's the process, and we should enjoy that process to the point where it can be seen and felt. Our games can be seen and felt, which really, Ted, is a mindfulness. This gets into the R3 approach a little bit. The first perspective has to do with our mindfulness as a golfer. Seen and felt to be mechanically sound, physically athletic, and tactically fluid processes for playing a game. So what we then, as golfers, have to do is define what it means to be mechanically sound. We need to define and understand what it means to be physically athletic. And then we have to define and understand what it means to play in a tactically fluid manner when we play the game. And this is what the R3 approach is all about. It's kind of breaking that mission statement down into little bite-sized pieces so that we can explore and have a look at what it takes to truly fulfill that strategy. So then what happened was we began to, again, take what's most important and what's most common across the board for all golfers at any skill level or experience level. And the first component puts forth certain immutable and unchanging facts about the game. These are things about the game, aspects of the game that are the same now as they've always been, and they're the same as they always will be. And there are 5 of them. There's 5 universal truths about playing the game of golf, and this is what component number 1 is all about. And it simply states that when playing the game, 2 of these truths have to do with our mind and our brain, actually, and the other 3 have to do with our club and body. And the first truth of the game is that we simply have to take what we've got and make it work. As simple as that sounds, that's not often the case with folks, with golfers. Yeah, and then the next three would have to do with our club and body, and that is that whatever method it is that we might be exploring or whatever tip or whatever aspect of the game, we have to set an angle in the swing between our arms and the shaft of the club. We then have to move that angle through an acceptable and repeating swing path, and then ultimately we have to release that angle. Those are the mechanical aspects of what, we all as golfers have to do in order to hit a solid shot. And then that fifth truth about the game is a really interesting one. It has to do with the fact that in order to play our best golf and in order to be in what we refer to as good fluid motion when we play, we have to possess the ability to subtract our thinking down essentially to nothing or close to nothing when we play, or at least when we hit a golf shot. So component number one explores those 5 aspects of playing the game. That's what component number one is all about.
Yeah, and they're really great universal laws and truths, if you will, because you're right. As you mentioned in the first one, taking what you've got that particular day and making it work. And Clint, you and I have talked about this before. Maybe you can expand a little bit. One of the problems that a lot of high handicap or amateurs do is they get on the range and maybe they're hitting some pretty decent shots, but then they get out in the golf course and everything falls, and they just can't seem to take that sort of good shot making, if you will, from the range out to the golf course. What causes, do you think, a lot of that, and what are some of the things that you've utilized the R3 approach, some of the and we're going to get into more of it as we go along, but that have helped to take people from the range, if you will, and some of those that confidence level out into the golf course? What are some things that you're doing to try and facilitate that?
Well, I think Todd and Mike are probably the 2 best I've ever seen at putting their students on the golf course. They have their range work and stuff, but both of them take their students on the golf course. Tremendous amount of time that they spend with them out there trying to teach them how to go from the practice tee to the golf course. But most importantly, I think from my perspective, is that the way the R3 approach is laid out, it's almost a way of convincing their students that, hey, this part of your game is okay. Mike talks to me about this all the time. Hey, your game's okay. Why don't you just go out and play?
Right.
And so if I can convince my students that they're moving that angle and stuff through the proper path and supporting it well with their body, that again comes back to this concept we talked about earlier, is confidence, faith, and their ability to take what they have, what Mike's talking about, take what you got and make it work. It has a tremendous level of confidence and faith built into it. So therefore, if I can convince my students that they're moving the club well enough, it gives me an opportunity to get them on the course to help them learn how to use what they have versus trying to create something to use, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so it's Mike and Todd will add to this, but I think that the way I use the R3 approach, as much as anything else, is a simple, a path. We've called it a path for a long time, to either show the student what they need to improve on, or show them that what they have is good enough or good for now. And that way we can get their mindset and, okay, well, let's move to the next level then. Let's move over to figuring out some strategy on how to use what I have. And I use Mike's heard it and Todd has too, enough they're probably tired of it. It's all about the third shot.
Right.
It's all about getting to that third shot. And if you can get there, and Todd's the best I've ever seen at it. He just kind of hits it down range and chips and putts, shoots 65, and doesn't not, so it's all about, to me, that organizational skill of proving or disproving whether the student is ready to go out and get that. So if you can get them convinced that what they have is okay, it gives you a better chance to try to bridge it over. And we use the term bridge from the physical aspect or the what axis over to the how axis. We want to bridge them over, and I use it as more of a confidence builder to help them get across that bridge successfully. Yeah,
well said. Todd, I want to bring you in here. As I mentioned, I know from what Clint has mentioned that you have do a lot of great work with particularly junior golfers and that. Again, Clint obviously is giving you a lot of credentials here tonight, and I agree with him wholeheartedly.
I don't know about the 65 all the time. But.
Every time he plays, he wins every pro he plays in.
Yeah. But Todd, what I wanted to ask you is this: is obviously when you're working, with some of the juniors, in many cases you might be working with a clean slate, meaning that they haven't necessarily had a lot of bad, lessons, if you will, ingrained. So you've got a clean slate to work with. What are some of the things that you try to start them off in order to get them on that right path? And obviously, I want you to reference some of the things that Mike and Clint and you are going to be talking about tonight. Where do you start from day one with some of the juniors?
I mean, I don't think that the golf swing has really changed over the years. So, if you got a beginner, young kid that's coming in, they all going to hold the club bad. So you really end up sort of starting out with a grip. But, we try to move them through that process pretty fast to where we're talking about, those laws that Mike was talking about. When we're talking about the angle, swing path, how and when should we release the club. And, that's basically our starting point with each player.
And obviously, as I mentioned, with the junior golfers, it's a little bit, I think, easier, is it not? Because they haven't, been, playing maybe for 20 years and ingrained some bad habits. So you're not really having to undo things necessarily, as opposed to teaching them the right way from square one. Correct?
I think sometimes it can be, but I mean, a lot of the problem. To me, golf is I come from the baseball background, playing college baseball, and really got into golf when I was 22 or 23 years old, and went from hitting a baseball left-handed and playing golf right-handed. So it was a totally different, unnatural sort of position, So
right.
I think what happens in the golf swing is really, a lot of these kids, we see a lot of kids that come in with very little athletic ability. And golf is kind of a last resort. They've tried everything else. And so, you end up basically teaching them some forms of athletic ability in order to teach them golf. How would they feel throwing a ball? Would that relate to the golf swing any at all? Or have they swung a tennis racket? Anything that you can sort of apply to them that they may have already done as a younger kid or as a middle schooler, just to sort of get, perfect example. I got a guy that started a couple of weeks ago that's a high school baseball player, pitcher. We were talking about releasing the club. He would not, he's having a hard time releasing the club. So, the explanation was to him, what's the motion that he make to throw a changeup in his pitching?
Right.
As soon as you gave him that little idea, automatically he starts hitting straight.
Wow.
And so I think it's being able to associate things with them that they're already comfortable doing, and kind of take it out of the realm of golf, where you're mixing the two sports together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I do. And, you're exactly right. I think that there are a lot of, transitions, if you will, from one sport to another. I think and this goes back, Clint, what we talked about in the first part of the program, about getting kids out and getting them active in sports, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be golf, but just in sports, and getting them out playing again, because they learn and develop skills that will help them in all aspects of their life, but it also makes it a little easier transition. It is very difficult when somebody has not done anything to try and, it doesn't matter whether it's golf or something else, but to try and teach them, some years later when they've never really had any exposure. So it's a little bit more difficult that way. Mike, I want to bring you back in here as well to let's continue on with some of the other components. Let's go to component number 2. I know you mentioned a little bit of it, but just let's talk about the second component of R3.
It's perfect segue, actually, And when you have a look at component number 2, Ted, the R3 approach too, it's all about beginning with the end in mind, and that's one of the tenets of the first perspective. There is that, if we're truly going to start with the end in mind in terms of genuinely improving at the game, we're going to have a plan, and this is what the R3 approach does. It does lay out a path for us. It helps us to organize our approach, organize our thoughts and actions towards what it is we're going to be doing in order to genuinely improve. Well, perspective number too, it points out the fact, and again, we're all about facts and realities,
Sure.
As far as genuinely improving at the game. If we're genuinely going to improve, it's going to happen because we're raising our mindfulness as a golfer. Well, if we're truly raising our mindfulness as a golfer, it's because we're improving from 4 different perspectives. We're improving from a mechanical perspective, and that has to do with what Todd mentioned. It has to do with the fact that the club is a tool, and if we're genuinely going to improve mechanically, it's because we're using that tool in a manner close to the way in which it's been designed to be used, which means that a golfer needs to understand what the angle is all about, the angle between our arms and the shaft of the club. That's our primary source of power in a golf swing. It's responsible for angular momentum in the swing. And then we're going to understand, that golfer is going to understand what it means to move that angle through an acceptable and repeating swing path. We relate it to a hammer and a nail. You have to bring the hammer into a nail on an acceptable and repeating path in order to drive that nail in. If you're out of the path with that hammer, you're going to bend the nail every time. Well, the golf club needs to simply come into the ball on an acceptable and repeating swing path. So that's part of the mechanical perspective. And then when we get a good understanding of what the mechanical perspective is, you then shift your focus over to the physical perspective. Now, we refer to this as the lab because this is where we do all of our experimenting. This is where we build our personal swing styles and whatnot. And the physical perspective is all about our body. It's all about the athletic factor involved with swinging the club. So in perspective number 3, when we're talking about that, we indicate that we'll simply get into a ready position, which would involve our grip, aim, and setup, and then we'll create 2 pivots during the swing around a stable spine. And essentially, that's the golf swing. Now, the quality of any shot that we hit or any shot that we might play, it's going to be a direct result of the rhythm and timing on that particular swing. Very much a physical process, which involves our athletic factor. Well, these are all aspects of working our golf swings that are specific to that physical perspective. So when you then look at the R3 approach, you'll see that coming next is component number 3. Well, in the book, if and when you have a look at it, which I hope you do, you'll see that perspective number 3 presents a puzzle, a blending puzzle, we call it. And it's pretty neat because it indicates in that puzzle there are 16 characteristic traits that, again, we all possess. You possess them, I possess them. We all possess them, but the puzzle points them out specifically in terms of what that particular puzzle piece has to do with. So as you look at the puzzle, you'll see that there's 2 axes. There's the what axis, that's what we work on, which is the mechanical and the physical perspective. And then you'll cross the bridge. As you look at the puzzle, you'll understand what we're talking about. When you cross the bridge, you're getting off that what axis. In other words, you're no longer thinking about what you're doing with your golf swing. And you get onto the how axis, and that has to do with how you play the game once you're on the golf course. And as you look at the different puzzle pieces there, Ted, in the puzzle, you can specifically look at one aspect of any one of those 4 perspectives and begin to open up that particular aspect of what's truly required to genuinely improve at the game. So what it does is it really does provide a means of creating thought, provoking thought, and then what we do is simply create some good enthusiasm about that thought and then help to direct some good efforts in terms of developing more of a holistic approach to playing the game. And by using these different components, it really does begin to help us again to, as Clint pointed out, organize our thoughts in terms of how it is that we're going to be directing those thoughts as our experience with and exposure to the game continues over time. So we've actually covered the first 3 components. We've looked at the first component, the 5 universal truths of the game. The second component there, which has to do with the mechanics of the swing and the 4 perspectives.
Right.
And then the blending puzzle, which is component number 3.
Now, Clint, let me ask you, obviously there are a lot of components to the R3 approach, and one of the things, and I agree wholeheartedly. I've not obviously read the book yet, Mike, but I certainly will. But through my navigating on the website and that, I've gotten a general idea of what you're talking about. How do you, Clint? I want to ask you this because I know you're good at articulating. How do you take the? I'm throwing you under the bus. In other words, how do you take the information that you're talking about here tonight and translate it in a way that, I guess, keeps it as simple as possible for the student? Obviously, there's a lot of information that we're talking about here, and from an outsider, I don't want them to think, wow, I've got to remember all this. So how do you sort of correlate it or manage it in such a way that the student is able to understand and grasp what it is you're trying to explain without having to think that they've got to have 5,000 thoughts going through their mind?
Well, I think the component number 3, the puzzle, and to me is one of the best aspects of the R3 approach is the puzzle. Todd relates it to his students a lot. Mike uses it. I use it a lot. But we all use it in a different way. If we got a beginner, we don't necessarily, I don't anyway, and I don't think Todd might does, is overwhelmed with all this information. We know the proper path to take them. Like Todd mentioned, he knows the physical aspect and the puzzle well, and he's done it. They've done it so many times and with so many students. Right. It's just the path that they take, and we understand that path. So we try to get our student on that line of progression and improvement from the very beginning. And I use it simply to help myself organize my thoughts on how to help a student, because I use the puzzle, says, okay, well, let me, as we've all done in the past forever, let me see how they're moving the club. Are they moving the club fine? Well, that's the top right-hand corner of the puzzle. What are they doing with the tool? Are they setting the angle? Are they, releasing the club? Then when we look at, well, are they supporting it with their body? We use that with the beginners and people and it's up to the teacher, I think, to know when to get in depth on a particular idea or just guide the student through it, knowing where you're guiding them. Okay, so I use it a lot with students that are advanced players. I said, here's the puzzle, here's what we're doing, and there's a lot of times where I just do it without them knowing what I'm doing. So you have to, you can overwhelm them, but there's a lot of information there. But the real crux, I think, of the R3 approach is we all have our own, let's call it method or theory. Todd's got a theory, Mike's got a theory, I got one, Ted's got a theory. We've all got this general idea of how we would like to see a person play. The R3 approach is something that helps all of us teach our own method. It's an approach to teaching and learning versus what you're supposed to learn. Like Mike said earlier, it's you can take any approach. It's whatever. If you want to use David Ledbetter, you want to use Pete's method or Ted's method, you can take the R3 approach and plug all of this in, as long as that approach or that method really buys into those universal laws.
Let me ask you,
if your method doesn't fit those universal laws, you might want to rethink your method.
Right. Todd, let me ask you, for working with the juniors and that, does the puzzle allow you, by utilizing what Clint was just talking about here, does it allow you the opportunity? Because obviously there's going to be situations where you're looking at the four perspectives, if you will, where there are going to be areas of that puzzle where players are going to be stronger in, and obviously, does it allow you to identify easier, do you think, by using this method, where the strengths and weaknesses a player might have?
Yeah, I think for us as a teacher, it's almost like a roadmap. We know that a student, and the biggest issue in golf that most of us see is, swing paths are bad. Most people are too steep, and so if you're able to go in and identify and then be able to look at the puzzle with someone and say, this is where we're weak, this is where we want to get better at, you can isolate that spot until they truly understand how to do that. The biggest problem that I think that we see, and I'm just sitting here thinking while you guys are talking, in golf instruction, we have really been, as far as this puzzle goes, for the most part, we've always taught the what axis,
right?
Which is what the club's doing, what the body's doing. We've never really got into sort of detail, and that's what we see with most of our kids. They move the club pretty good. They actually play pretty good. They hit really quality shots. It's just they really don't know what to do on the golf course. In different situations, and I don't, when you look at the puzzle, you'll understand what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Clint has actually really helped me with this. Golf, we all talk about the mental side of golf. To me, the mental side of golf is just the decision you make, what club you want to hit, whether you want to flight it down, whether you want to hit it high, whether you want it cut, and but
sure.
The next shot that you hit after that has all to do with the emotions. If someone gets out of control emotionally, they're not going to be able to do all that they want to do with the golf ball. And so really with a lot of the kids, we actually spend a lot of time working on that process. How do we control the emotions on the golf course to where that it's, and I'll go back to my baseball days. If you watch Zach Greinke pitch, you can't tell if that guy's in the bullpen or if he's throwing his 8 warm-up pitches or if the guy's pitching in the game. You don't know if he's throwing a ball or a strike. There's not any emotion tied to the shot, and I think as a player we tend to do that a lot. But I just think we get hung up on the golf swing when it's actually pretty good a lot of times.
Yeah, I agree, and more often than not, you get asked the question. I'm sure, and I'm sure all of you would probably agree with this. There is a lot of the what in the golf swing, and not so much of the how. And I think that's the question that most people want is, okay, how do I do this? They don't understand. And you're right. I think golf instruction has become so technical now, and with so many different theories and swing thoughts and this going on, that it's become very confusing. And students quite often are trying to learn all of these different techniques, but they're not really understanding the hows and the next step, if you will. And what you just described, Todd, is spot on. This is where I think the industry needs to move itself into. Mike, again, I want to come back to you. Let's move on to component or number 4, I guess.
Let me say one more thing about that puzzle there, Ted. And if you had the puzzle in front of you right now, which is the case, let's say if we're sitting with a golfer in the office, or we're talking with a golfer about his or her game and that plan for improvement, beginning with the end in mind and whatnot. If we're all looking at that puzzle right now, as we were talking about, as Todd was just mentioning, the difference between emotional processes and mental processes, we're looking at that fourth perspective, that bottom right corner piece, the tactical perspective. The 3 neighboring pieces in the puzzle to that tactical perspective are emotional processes, which states that emotional processes are reflexive feelings. And then another piece is the mental processes, which has to do with our thoughts, our attitudes, and our decisions when we're out there. And the third piece, a neighboring piece to that tactical perspective, has to do with law number 1. Ultimately we have to take what we've got and make it work, which is our belief system. And it also states in that piece that, it's about our confidence and it's about our imagination. These are all things that we begin to utilize when we cross the bridge from that what axis over to the how axis. When we begin to genuinely learn how to play better golf, it's because we're all becoming better tacticians. Well, as we're sitting there with that individual, we're looking at this puzzle. So we're actually pointing at these different puzzle pieces as we talk about that particular aspect of playing the game. And then once we cross that bridge and we get into that tactical perspective and we're talking with that individual about these different pieces, they see clearly, right there in front of them, how everything ties together. All these 16 pieces begin to tie together in a holistic manner, So all of a sudden, you're seeing all these 16 pieces begin to blend together, which is the primary goal of the R3 approach, is to develop our games again to the point where they can be seen and felt to be mechanically sound, physically athletic, and tactically fluid processes for playing a game. Well, when you repeat that statement for them, and they're looking at the puzzle at the same time, they see on paper right there in front. We have a big poster in the office there, so we're able to point toward these things as we're talking about them. they see the whole blending process taking place. So it's really a pretty cool way to convey, you know, what is truly involved in terms of crossing that bridge and getting onto that how axis and ultimately becoming better players.
Ted, let me add something to what Mike's saying here. I think that if you look at it, and I think that it simplifies it, is that the what axis is where we teach a person how to hit a golf ball.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The how axis or the how axis is where we teach them how to play golf.
Right.
Precisely.
And very few, and I'm the poster child for this. A lot of people are. Is that they spend way too much time trying to hit a golf ball better.
Right.
And instead of being over here going out and learning how to play better. And I think from a student perspective is when we can explain that to the student and they can see it in that puzzle, they get a clearer understanding about what they're trying to get done.
Right.
You know, and you don't see that in a lot of teaching styles. You really don't, because we get trapped as teachers, like Todd was mentioning, we get trapped with teachers just as easy as our students get trapped with not going across that bridge and learning how to play golf. We get trapped in teaching them how to hit a ball.
Well, I tell you, a conversation that I had, Ted, with a guy and he's a top 100 teacher. I'm not going to say his name, but this was years ago. The guy said to me, he said, it's not our job to teach them how to play, it's just teach them how to hit it. And I was very young in the golf industry at the time. I mean, it's been 20 years ago. And I thought, well, you know, that's not the way to look at it.
No.
You know, our goal is to make them play better.
Right, and this goes back to what I was talking about earlier on about the frustration level in golf in general. I'm not talking about the teaching side, but the playing side. I think this is really what, and I'm not saying it's the only reason, but this is certainly a strong reason why, Clint, you refer to sort of that generation of the 20-somethings that have gotten away, is because it's become so difficult, and they're not really being taught how to play golf as much as all of the mechanical side of it and you know, getting in the right slot and in the right position. And all of that is certainly important to understand. But would it not make more sense then for instruction to flip it and do it the other way around? Let's teach people how to play golf first and then focus on the more technical side, if you will. Would that not be a better avenue for the industry to shift to?
Would you not like to see on the Golf Channel talking about how to play 9 holes of golf versus how to hold the club?
Can I jump back in?
Yeah,
sure.
This is what the R3 approach is, Ted. It starts with it begins with the end in mind, and that's the first thing that we talk about.
Right.
This is what's involved. This is where we're going. You know, it's like planning a trip. This is where we're going. This is what we're going to be doing. This is what we're going to need to do. This is how we'll be directing our thoughts and actions as we evolve as golfers, and we'll become better in that mechanical perspective. We'll become better in that physical perspective. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want you, Mike, while you're here, I want you to, because I've got to obviously move on, but I want to go to the fourth component, which is the 8 facets of swing work. So go ahead.
Right. Again, the fourth component, and this is where this really gets into actions. Those first 3 components are very much about thoughts, Ted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how we'll be directing our thoughts. The last 3 components are more about actions. This is the stuff that we're doing in terms of putting what we're thinking about into action. And component number 4 simply creates a little to-do list for us when we're on the practice tee. It doesn't matter what method it is that we're exploring, and it's good to explore all methods. You know, they're all good, they're all relevant, but there are certain aspects that are kind of common to all methods. And the 8 facets simply points at 8 aspects or things that we should be keeping at the front of our thinking when we're on the practice tee. For instance, the ready position. That's one of the first. That's the first facet. That's our grip, aim, and setup. And then the second facet, we call it the set position. That's where we're setting the angle at the top of the swing. Okay, and then we'll move from that facet to developing a good swing path. We refer to that as the go move. So the swing really becomes a ready, set, go process. You set the angle, and then you make your downswing. And then during the downswing, at some point, we refer to it as down around the 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock impact zone, we're going to have to understand what arm release is all about. And we point out the fact that arm release is all about squaring the club face. Okay, and then the next facet that we have on the to-do list is to remember that we have to work on our body release too. There are two things that release in the golf swing: arms release and our bodies release, and we want a nice blend of the two taking place. And the body release again gets into that pivot action and the spine angle, staying in one place. Then the next facet, in terms of those 8 facets, would be developing rhythm and timing in our swing. This is what ultimately determines the quality of any given shot or swing that we make. Then the 6th facet is just developing touch and feel. Touch and feel has to do with our ability to find the sweet spot on the golf club face. We use impact tape quite often, just to help a golfer raise their level of awareness as to where on the face they're catching the ball. So working on touch and feel is one of the 8 facets. And then the final facet is simply reminding us that we all need to get in better athletic condition. We need to stretch before we begin hitting balls, so we should remember to, when we do go practice, let's warm up properly. So the 8 facets simply is a reminder, a to-do list, if you will, of 8 facets that we as golfers should all be continuing to hold directly in front of our thinking when we're out there on the practice tee, versus just going out and banging balls out there, which leads to the next component. Can I go ahead and talk about that one?
Let me just stop you real quick, because I want to quickly on number 4. I want to ask Todd a question and bring you back in here again to put it in a perspective of with students. Obviously, the first 3 of the 8 facets are relatively easy to understand and easy for people to see how you can be taught that. But how do you articulate, if you will, the other facets of the swing work? Because the swing is obviously, as you know, is such a fast process. We're talking literally, a second and a half to 2 seconds to complete the golf swing. So to understand the release and of both the body and the arms, how are you able to convey that message to your students in a fashion that they'll understand and be able to feel as they're going through that transition?
Well, I think the biggest thing there is you have to get them comfortable with the first facet. So if I'm talking about creating that angle, I don't really want a student worried about the other 2.
Right.
Let's learn how to create that angle first. When you learn how to create that angle, you can move on to the next. Because to me, that's probably one of the primary reasons that people can't set the golf club. When you teach, so you see beginners, you see they have a hard time understanding how to actually set the golf club. So if you can teach them how to set the golf club, it makes it easier to move it. So you wouldn't want to talk about the release. You wouldn't want to talk about how the angle works down until they actually learn how to create. You
move them setting the angle into the swing path, which is the next facet. And then your question, Ted, is how do you help them understand what arm release is all about and what body release is all about? Video is very helpful at this point. And let me tell you, 8, 9, 10 out of 10 golfers do not release the club very well with their arms. They don't understand what it means to begin with. But when you show them a video of themselves chicken winging it and compare it to a good arm release, they understand immediately what it's all about. So that's a great way to.
Right, and a lot of that goes back to number 1, the grip and the aim and the setup. Obviously, when those components are in their proper place, then obviously the others are going to follow suit much easier. And that's why, we've talked about this on the show many times, Clint. We've talked about really going back to the fundamentals. I think, too much emphasis is put on, as I talked about earlier, getting into this perfect position and getting into this, position over here. And really, each individual is, because they are different and everybody's swing is different, I think that once they get into the proper fundamentals to begin with, that swing is naturally going to, and there might be some coaching involved, but it is naturally going to happen and flow once those components are put into their proper perspective, correct? Mike, or
was that Clint? Yeah, was that Clint?
Mike.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Oh, yes, definitely. I'm sorry. I thought that was you were directing it.
I might.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Most definitely. No question about it. And this, Ted, again, down through that 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock impact zone, from about waist high on the downswing to waist high on the through swing, that's really where the arm release and the body release are taking place. This is where we all, as golfers, really want to get good. And it doesn't matter I mean, I know golfers that are, you know, in their 80s and play wonderful golf because they have a good fluid arm release down at the bottom, you know. So it's very important that a golfer understand so that they can direct their thoughts and actions in the right way, at the right things, at the right time, which is what the R3 approach is all about. That's why we call it the R3 approach. But when they do correctly understand what arm release is down to that 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, because we can, in fact, be in different positions at the set point in the swing, you know. We can be out of plane. We can have the club face open or closed up there. But by the time we get down to that 9 o'clock position, entering that impact zone, we're all beginning to look alike. In other words, the same things are happening across the board with golfers. So this is where we really want to focus in terms of having a golfer genuinely become more mechanically sound with their swing, is because they understand what it means to be mechanically sound with their swing, which again goes back to what perspective number 2 is. You know, you understand and define what mechanically sound means, and then of course the physical process of just developing good rhythm and timing with those actions. That's that physical perspective. So it does begin to really make sense. It really begins to tie together in such a way that, you know, we can continue to refer to these different components in terms of having not only ourselves, but golfers better understand what it is they're doing. Another one of the tenets of the R3 approach is that when we play, as golfers, when we play, we're both players and competitors, teachers and coaches all at the same time. As a golfer, we genuinely perform all 4 of these roles collectively, you know. That's why golfers are always trying to help golfers, you know. That's one of the fun things about the game is that I don't know if you remember Conrad Railing. He was the Alabama golf coach way back in the day, but I remember hearing a quote by him, and he said, "Golf's the only game where there are more teachers than there are players," you know. And that's part of the fun of the game, you know. I mean, that's part of the fun of the game. We're all trying to help each other. You know, if we're I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's really what the purpose of this program is. You know, as Clint knows from being on the show, this is really what the purpose of this is to, you know, bring everybody together in a forum, if you will, and allow them the opportunity to have some of these discussions that we need. I want to move, and not to detract from that, but I want to move on to number 5, because this is an area that, you know, definitely. A lot of the high handicappers particularly fall short on, and I want you to go over this.
It's hugely important, and it falls right in place, right behind component number 4, you know, the 8 facets of physically working on our swing. Well, when it comes to practicing, the fact is, practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent. So it's very important that we understand that there are different ways to practice, you know. Most of the practicing that we as golfers do is purely result-based practice, which makes total sense, because when we go to the practice tee, what we want to do is hit a good shot and enjoy the feeling of that good result. And we're most likely going to hit the best shot we can because we're using the same existing movements that we have. We just timed it good, and we're happen to hit a good shot because of it. But in terms of changing a movement, in terms of genuinely changing a movement, what we're talking about here is really rearranging some motor patterns in our brain. You know, it's hard to do. Right. So if we're genuinely going to change a movement, change a physical swing action that someone has ingrained through thousands and thousands of repetitions another way, you have to understand that it requires a different type of practicing, and that type of practicing we refer to as technique-based practice. Well, when we're technique-based practicing, the result is not important. We have an area where we have 2 big mirrors where an individual can actually watch themselves swing and hit, we use tennis balls, into a net. So if we're really working on technique-based practice, we'll go down into that area and take the result completely out of the process at that point and just have that individual focus completely on the technique changes that you're trying to make. So, and this is a fact, you know, again, all about facts and realities. If we're genuinely going to change a motor pattern in our brain as far as our swing goes, we have to understand that it requires technique-based effort, repetition of this new movement until we have genuinely logged enough reps to where this movement now has a better chance of becoming fluidly good, which means we're just doing it without thinking about it, like a motor pattern movement is. So technique-based practice is a second form of practicing. And then there's a third type of practicing that we refer to as deep practicing. Well, if a person is genuinely going to reach that level where they are accessing, neural patterns in their brain to the extent that they're genuinely changing, they're doing so because they're taking it deeper. In other words, it's like a second wind effort, where you might set out to do a certain amount of practicing, and then you kind of get into it, and you become re-energized, and you end up doing a lot more practicing. Well, when we're able to experience deep practice or deliberate practice, it's referred to as, what we're doing is we're just simply going deeper into our mind, body, club, interaction, and we're accessing and genuinely changing, we're altering those motor patterns in our brain. We're genuinely making movement changes to our swing. Now, we cannot make movement changes like this unless we experience deep practice like that at some point. So again, this is just a third form of practicing. And then there's a fourth type of practicing that all the best players throughout history and athletes, and really anyone in any activity or profession does, and that is that they're able to use their imagination more effectively. We refer to this as sensory practice. Well, if you're genuinely able to approach your practicing processes more creatively and using your imagination more effectively, you literally can think your way into improving your golf swing. If you have the right pictures in your mind and you have the right sensations in your mind, and you're practicing the movements, you may be doing it at home without even having a club in your hand, or you might be doing it in your hotel room, or you might be doing it in the elevator, as you're heading up to the 15th floor or something. But using sensory practice as a form of practice is the fourth form of practicing, and that means that even the night before a round of golf, certain golfers have this ability to project into the future using their imagination, and they play that upcoming round of golf in their mind. Well, using your imagination in this manner is a very creative way to genuinely, achieve that overall strategy of improving our golf games. So the fifth component then is all about practice and how we should understand that there are, in fact, different ways to actually practice, not just hitting golf balls in a result-based manner.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point. And Clint, and I'm sure you'd agree, that the fourth component is very interesting because obviously, as Mike had just referred to, a lot of the top players will utilize that if they're playing in an event any given week. They're going to practice that round in their head. But the amateurs that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis obviously don't do that. They don't understand that. And quite often we will try to implement that on the driving range and say to them, instead of just hitting balls and raking and hitting the balls, let's pretend we're playing the first hole or the second hole or the third hole.
Exactly. Sure.
We'll try to do that. And I think if amateurs, especially if they belong to a club and they're playing that club every week, there's a great opportunity the night before, as you said, Mike, to be able to tap into that sensory practicing and allow them, especially if they're getting ready to play in a club event, to have that practice round, if you will, in their head. And work through all the kinks, if you will, then. I want to move on to, just because we're getting real close on time, and I want to make sure we get the sixth one in here. Mike,
sixth component. The sixth component we refer to as the PPA cycle. It's about preparation, performance, and analysis. If we're genuinely going to become better players, it's because we're, again, raising our mindfulness as a golfer. And if we're doing that, we're all becoming better players, competitors, teachers, and coaches. Well, the PPA cycle is all about becoming a better tactician. In other words, a great coach is able to take a performance, analyze that performance, and then base whatever types of practicing processes are going to come as a result of that last performance. We're able to practice better for the next component or the next performance. So we're continuously going through the preparation, performance, and analysis cycle with virtually everything we do in our lives. But as it relates to golf, we're going through this PPA cycle. Every time we play a shot, we'll prepare to play that shot. We'll play that shot. We'll quickly analyze what just took place. And at the end of a round, we need to go back into that round and have a good analysis of what took place, how many fairways we hit, how many greens we hit, how many times we got it up and down when we missed a green, how many putts we made, what kind of putting footage we had in that round. So, as we're becoming better tacticians in this regard, we're learning how to better direct our thoughts and actions in terms of the practicing that we are going to do. so that we do in fact perform better once that next performance rolls around. So just understand, and in the R3 approach, we go into all these different components in some really good detail about what each one of them truly is and the different aspects of each component. But the fifth component is the PPA cycle. It's just about becoming a better tactician. In other words, we understand how to more effectively go through the preparation, performance, and analysis cycle as it relates to genuinely improving our golf games,
Yeah, and
those
and
are
that's
the six components.
Yeah, and that's a great way really to wrap it up, because I think this is an area, particularly for some of you high handicappers out there, it's not just all about ball striking and even good grips and that's important. One of the biggest things I think that we can all probably agree on that we see time and time again, and Clint, we talked about this earlier a little bit, about moving from the range into the game, is one of the biggest things that I always see with a lot of amateurs is they will get out on the golf course, something will happen, they'll prepare for the shot, and it won't go the way they want, and they'll start to make tweaks and adjustments out in the golf course. And that's one thing that the pros will not do, is they'll take, as you talked about earlier in component number 1, is take with what you've got that day and not try to tweak it and do it. And that's in the practice sessions, that's where you can make your adjustments, changing the technique or process-based practicing. That's where you can make those adjustments if need be. But the biggest flaw I see with a lot of amateurs out there is in their practicing, is they're doing the result-based practicing all the time, not making the changes there, but then trying to do it out in the golf course.
Yeah, without.
Well, one of the things that I would say is, how many times have you ever seen a recreational amateur player hit balls after they play?
Right. Exactly.
And that's what the tour players do all the time.
Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly, and there's obviously a benefit to that. That's where they're going to work out, through their analysis, their after-round analysis. That's where they're going to work out some of the issues that they feel they may have, and that's part of the preparation for the next round. Is they're going to do that after the round and do that. And I think a lot of the players out there that are not at that level do it the opposite way. They start, making adjustments and things along the way, and they get so confused that by the time they get to the end of the round, it's like a deflated tire. All of the wind's been knocked out of the tire, and they just don't know what to do. And then the clubs get thrown in the back of the car, and off home they go, and it's not a peaceful dinner afterwards, because somebody's not happy. So.
How many times have you seen them say, "I'm done, that's it, I quit," and then we see them tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then we see them tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Clint, just some final thoughts. We're getting real close here. Just a couple of quick thoughts, and then Todd, I'll let you, and then Mike, I'll let you finish off.
Yeah, I'm going to let Mike and Todd have the bulk of it, but just for a bit of advertising, if they want to get in touch with us, they go to tgmgolf.com. All of our information is right there, phone numbers, bios, everything about the R3 approach. Or if they want to go and message us at TGM Golf, the R3 approach, that's our Facebook page. They can do that and get in touch with us that way. We'd be more than happy, any of us, to discuss in more detail the R3 approach and how they can improve their game and whatever technique they're using the R3 approach to help them learn it. So, outside of that, Ted, I appreciate it, and I'm going to go and let Mike and Todd finish things up. Thanks,
all right,
Ted.
Appreciate it, Clint. All right, thanks, Clint.
Ted, I just want to say, I won't really have anything else to add. I just want to say thank you for allowing us to be on the program tonight. So.
Well, Todd, it's a pleasure having you guys on, and as I've said to Clint many times, I always enjoy having Clint on the Coach's Corner panel discussions. He has some great insight, and I know he always tries to work the R3 approach in somehow, some way, or some form. And I think, as you talked about, Mike, in the very beginning, it's really the standard, if you will, in golf instruction, and regardless of what swing theory or what methodology you might follow, all of these components that we talked about tonight are crucial, really, in understanding to be able to play. So I want to thank you guys for coming on and sharing this with the audience, because it's not just for the players out there, as I indicated when I was promoting tonight's show. It's also for the instructors out there. Sometimes we need to get back on track, and it's a great way. So I strongly encourage everybody to go to, it's tgmgolf.com, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Go to tgmgolf.com. and check out more about the R3 approach that Mike and Todd and Clint talked about tonight. And Mike, I'll let you have the final word before I let you guys go.
Yeah, thanks again, Ted. Always enjoy. I think this might be the second or third time I've been on with you, but I listen to your show often and truly enjoy it. And we appreciate you allowing us the opportunity to talk about the R3 approach. And that's what it is. It's just a tool. It's a tool that we as golfers can all use to help provoke some thought about how we can genuinely improve at this awesome and peculiar game.
Yeah, well said. Guys, I want to thank you very much for coming on Golf Talk Live. As I always say, you have an open and extended invitation to come on anytime you want, Mike and Todd as well. And I'm going to be sending out, again, if you're able to join in, that would be fantastic. But I'm going to be sending out the schedule here, in the next week or so for the Coach's Corner, and that's really where an opportunity where, much like what we just did here the last hour, is allow an opportunity for some of the coaches and teachers out there to come together in a panel discussion and talk about some things. So if you guys want to jump in and throw your hat, as it were, in the ring, I'd love to do it. I'll send the email out to Clint and let him forward it appropriately. And if you guys have some time next year to jump in on some of those sessions, that takes place the first hour of the Golf Talk Live program, but I would love to have you guys join in as your schedules permit. So, again, Mike Lawrence and Todd Ellison, thank you very much for coming on. And, again, remember, everybody, to go to the TGMGolf.com to find out more about the R3 approach. Thanks, guys, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Ted. Good night.
All right, good night. All right, that was my special guests from TGM Golf. That was Clint Wright, Todd Ellison, and Mike Lawrence joining me here on Golf Talk Live, and I want to thank them for doing so, and thank you, Clint, for helping to set this up. I want to also take this opportunity to thank my good friend, Mr. Pete Buchanan, as well, for being in the panel discussion earlier with Clint. Had some great discussion about really how to grow this game. And as we officially go off air here in just a second or two, I want to thank all of the listeners worldwide for faithfully tuning into Golf Talk Live each week. I certainly have a great amount of pleasure and enjoyment of having a number of highly talented coaches, teacher professionals, and authors and entrepreneurs stop by the program, and it's really through their participation, much like you heard tonight, in guest appearances that help make Golf Talk Live a first-class show. A special thank you to some of the sponsors and supporters of the program, Mr. Jonathan Laird from South Coast Golf Guide. Go to southcoastgolfguide.com and pick up your copy of the guide. It has got some great courses from all throughout the southeastern part of the United States that you can play in the guide. And if you're also interested in advertising, you can reach out to Jonathan@southcoastgolfguide.com is his email address. Meredith Kirk, of course, from Meredith Kirk Golf and meredithkirk.com. She was a 2014 Mrs. South Carolina. She's also a top-notch golf instructor as well out in the Myrtle Beach area. Go to meredithkirk.com for more information there. Nikki and Tiffany Litherland, thank you very much for helping spread the word. I'm going to have Nikki, as I've mentioned, come on the show here in the near future. Great golf professional as well. So thank you to Nikki and his wife, Tiffany Litherland, for helping spread the word for Golf Talk Live. Mr. Bernie Pinder from Ontic Golf, onticgolf.com. Thanks again, Bernie, for all of your word and help in spreading the word as well for the program. And thanks for coming out with really a great line of custom-made putters. Go to onticgolf.com, and Bernie would be more than happy to set you up with one of his customized putters. Mr. Sean Kelly, of course, owner of linkedgolfers.com, a great community first on LinkedIn, huge social media for business professionals. He's taken that format group from Linked Golfers from LinkedIn and brought it out to the main part of the web at linkedgolfers.com. So make sure you check out Sean Kelly. He's the owner and facilitator of that format as well. And Mr. Peter Doyle from Doyle Golf Solutions in Ireland. Thank you, Peter, a great club maker and great teacher professional as well at Doyle Golf Solutions. Thank you, my friend, for all of your continued support. And I want to thank, again, all of you for tuning in tonight's broadcast. I hope you enjoyed it. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the program, I will not be doing a broadcast next week for either the Women of Golf show or Golf Talk Live. We'll take a break, of course, in observance of Thanksgiving holiday. And I just want to wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving. Have a safe holiday, everybody. And I will see you here in a couple of weeks on Golf Talk Live at 6 p.m. here on the program. God bless everybody and have a fantastic holiday. Thank you.